picture above that. And there are several others up there of the first few days of her life. She's almost 3 weeks old now. And my, does the time fly. I was going to go camping today. Because after talking to a certain whisperer who enjoys the natural type of camping, it made me feel like camping late in the season. I actually packed up all my gear and went to a state park. And it's a smaller state park. The lake's not real big, but when I got there, the lake is divided in two. There's a walkway through it, and 2/3 of it's on one side and 1/3 is on the other. But the 1/3 side is still, I'd say, at least 2 city blocks long. And it was almost completely dried up. There were dead fish everywhere. And I know that there was a drought. I thought that for this region that we had got past it, because we've had several rains since. But I couldn't believe it. I had been in that same spot with a friend in this spring, and the water was at normal depth, which was probably 6 feet deep, maybe 7 feet, I don't know exactly, but a normal depth for a small lake. And I couldn't believe it. I took a video of it. And maybe sometime I'll put up a few shots of that. I texted a friend about it, and he said this is going on all over the place. Rivers drying up, large lakes drying up. He sees it as a sign of the end of the world. I try not to think like that, especially with the birth of my daughter, so recent. It's been a very freaky, scary year for natural disasters. That's for sure. I think that I'm going to play a little game here. It's a game only I can play it, I guess is what I'm gonna say, because it basically the game is I'm going to name each state, and I'm going to try to say something about it that I know. Okay, I'm not on the internet. I'm not going to cheat like that. I'm going to see if I can name something about each state. So here we go. And I'm going to try and do this all from memory. The map of the United States in my head. So I'm just going to start in the northwest corner with Washington. And Washington State is famous for apples. It's famous for Mount St. Helens erupting in the early 80s. It's famous for the Seattle scene, coffee, Starbucks. obviously, that really took off in the 50s. It's famous for Los Angeles. It's famous for San Francisco, which are complete different cultures in the same state. Famous for earthquakes, for the La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles, where they've extracted numerous mammals. Obviously, carcasses and fossils of mammals. Idaho is famous for its mountains, which aren't quite as big as the Rocky Mountains. Well, they're part of the Rocky Mountains, but not quite as big as the Colorado Mountains. Famous for potatoes, of course. But I lived there for a short time, and yeah, very beautiful scenery. Wyoming. The one thing stands out in my head is Gillette, which is a town which is named after the person that invented the disposable razors. That's at the moment all I can really think of. Sorry, Wyoming. Nevada, obviously famous for Las Vegas and all that derives from Las Vegas, being the Rat Pack, the mafia, gambling, prostitution, legal and not. More recently, the TV show on History Channel, Pawn Stars. Utah is probably most famous for Salt Lake City and the Mormons. It's where the early Mormons, moved out to Utah to escape persecution long before it was a state. Montana, to me, is northern Texas. They're big on the cattle, they're big on the ranches, and they somewhat have the same personalities, in my opinion. I think it's even called Big Blue Sky Country or something like that. It's a pretty large state. Believe me, I've drove through it. Colorado, like I said, large mountains. But when I think of Colorado, I think of the big cities, actually. Denver, for example. Colorado Springs, Boulder. I don't know why, I've never been there, but that's what I think of. And of course the earthquakes that happened recently. Arizona. Well, of course, the Grand Canyon. I think of Phoenix. It's the largest capital state, the state capital, and it has grown enormously in the last 10 or 15 years. It was 900,000 in the late 90s, and it's pushing 2 million now. I also find it interesting that Flagstaff, which is about 100 miles away, can be 30 degrees cooler and more than Phoenix because of the elevation difference. And one last note, one of my favorite old bands, Megadeth, they are from Arizona. New Mexico. This is where I've been wanting to take a vacation for 10 years. New Mexico is famous for Billy the Kid. It is famous for the Carlsbad Caverns, which are the largest system of tunnels and caves in the world, I believe. And it's also famous for Roswell and the supposed UFO crash in 1947. Okay, Oklahoma. I would say Oklahoma been hit approximately 26 times by tornadoes. It's probably in the hottest spot of Tornado Alley between there and Kansas City. Okay, let's see. Kansas. I recently went to Kansas for the first time ever. And obviously it's probably most famous for the Wizard of Oz. And actually that's why we went. We went to the Oz Museum. And in a small town called Wamego. Yeah, very small. They only had 2 hotels. But Kansas does have a few large cities. Topeka, Wichita, Nebraska. When I think of Nebraska, I always think of Omaha. And that last year was the first time I went to Omaha. I went to the zoo. They have a very good zoo. South Dakota. Obviously, most people probably think of Mount Rushmore. And that was part of that same vacation. I had been out there as a kid, but I took my family. And we went to Deadwood, which is a famous western town. North Dakota. I've never been to North Dakota. I think of Fargo, and the reason I think of Fargo is because the movie Fargo. Yeah, I don't know a lot about it. I've read that it has the smallest population of any state, even less than the tiny states of like New Hampshire. It's only got about 500,000 people. I'm trying to think if I forgot anything through there. I don't think so. Minnesota. When I think of Minnesota, I think of Charlie Brown, because Charlie Brown's creator, Charles Schulz, was from the Minneapolis area. Iowa, which is where I'm from, obviously famous for corn. We're also famous for good school systems, good colleges, good football teams. Missouri. When I think of Missouri, of course, I think of St. Louis, and the Arch. But I also think of Mark Twain. That's where he was from. And as well as Jesse James and his brother Frank were also from Missouri. And the New Madrid fault line in the southeast corner of Missouri. It's a small fault line, but it has the potential to be the most dangerous earthquake zone in the country. Arkansas. 2 things immediately come to mind when I think of Arkansas. One is Bill Clinton. He's from there, or at least he was governor there. And it's the headquarters of Walmart. Louisiana. Obviously we think of Katrina when we think of Louisiana and New Orleans. But I went out there for a short time with my mother when I was 13. And we were in a town just north of Lake Pontchartrain, which is it's about 25 miles from New Orleans. So I think of giant mosquitoes and horrendous humidity. Mississippi. When I think of Mississippi, I think of Corinth. I think I pronounced that right. It was a stop we made coming back from Florida. And it seemed like it took us forever to get through that state. Alabama. 2 things I think of Alabama. One is Mobile, which seemed like a pretty rough town to me. They do have a battleship set up as a museum. It looked pretty cool. And the other thing is Forrest Gump. whiskey. Jack Daniels is in Tennessee, but I do believe that the distillery there is that dry county. Up here in Iowa, we have no dry counties, but they do have some counties in the south that you cannot buy alcohol. They have various rules. Some is liquor, some is only on certain days, like you can't buy it on Sunday. Some is only beer. Yeah, there's various things. Illinois. Illinois is my neighbor. I think of high taxes when I think of Illinois. I think of Metropolis, which is in the southern tip of Illinois, which is a town that I don't know if they renamed themselves, but they are based on Superman. Because Superman lives in Metropolis, a fictional city. And we've gone through there a few times and stayed there. It's a nice little town. I'm sorry if you can hear that train. I live about 2 blocks from railroad crossing, and I mean railroad crosses from both ways, so we get trains coming from all 4 directions. And a lot of times I don't even notice them anymore because it's day and night. But I just happen to notice it this time because I'm trying to whisper. Michigan. I think of Detroit, which makes me think of murder capital of the world. Makes me think of Detroit Rock City, the song by Kiss. And it also makes me think of Kid Rock. Wisconsin. When I think of Wisconsin, I think of, well, I took a trip up there with a friend once to Kenosha. But it makes me think of cheese, of course. My dad used to buy a real Wisconsin cheesecake at Christmas time. Just a small little 9 or 12 inch cheesecake, and let's all have a little taste of it, but it was very, very expensive. Let's see here, where are we at? Indiana. I don't know very much about Indiana. A couple girls I went to school with years back moved out there, and I talk to them once in a while on Facebook, but I know Indianapolis is very big. Well, in terms of Iowa, it's very big. It's about 700,000 people. Ohio. Again, a place I don't know a lot about. They have several large cities, Cincinnati, Toledo, Akron. I'm old enough to barely remember the old sitcom WKRP in Cincinnati. A really old sitcom about a radio station. Let's see here. Virginia. And yeah, when you start getting over into the New England states, I've never been out that way, so I don't know a lot about them. I know Virginia and West Virginia were some of the earliest states, and they were part of the original 13 colonies. accent. Again, don't know a lot about it. I do believe the Kennedys were from that area. Maryland, obviously famous for Washington, D.C., and Baltimore. And Baltimore makes me think of the cop show, The Wire, that was on in the early 2000s. I actually really like that show. Going on here, Maine. Maine makes me think of forests and rocky islands, but most of all makes me think of Stephen King. Okay, I know I've missed a few here. I cannot tell you anything about Vermont. I know nothing about it. So, and New Hampshire, same thing. Rhode Island, I know that Providence is there. It's a pretty big city, and I know that Rhode Island only has 3 counties. Okay, North Carolina. I know that Raleigh is there, another large city. South Carolina, you're starting to get really into what I call the Bible Belt. I like to write, and I did research for South Carolina, especially historical research. And I'd love to go visit that place sometime. They don't have very many big cities, but yeah, I think it's just north of Georgia, and I run the length of Georgia every time I go to Florida, so I'd love to go see it. Speaking of Georgia, yeah, I think of, they say Georgia peaches, but I never saw peaches the whole trip. No, what I saw was boiled peanuts. They cook peanuts in the shell in crock pot of water, and that looked rather nasty. And it's pretty popular. You see it in a lot of convenience stores. Florida. I couldn't say enough about Florida. I love Florida. I lived there for a while with my ex-wife. Florida has a lot to offer on the Gulf side and on the ocean side. Probably the best part is it's nice weather. But there is a drastic weather change from the north part of Florida to the southern part. I was in St. Augustine, and although much nicer than Iowa, and in wintertime it was only in the upper 50s. There was a little pause there, not that you would have heard it, but my family just got home. My wife usually goes down to her mother's on Saturday, but she has to work this Saturday because they're running overtime, so she decided to go today. She had the day off. But I think that I hit just about every state. If I didn't, please let me know. But I just ran them through my head. I usually see maps and things like that pretty well in my mind. And actually, the other day, kind of another weird little game. I put the coordinates of my town into Google Earth. Oh, there's a little one crying. But I put the coordinates into Google Earth, and she's crying. Her mother's getting to her, but yeah. Anyway, real quickly, and from those coordinates of my town, I know that Seattle from my town in Iowa based on just changing the coordinates, and I did pretty good actually. It's about 1,800 miles from here, so I was off by a couple hundred miles, but I got pretty close. And I did it with a few other ones, and I got even closer, so yeah, I'm a little strange. But okay, this has really gone long, longer than I've done any other whispers, so take care. Yeah, that baby's really going on. She might be getting a bath, maybe that's what it is. She don't like baths for some reason. Alright, sorry it's so long. Almost 30 minutes now, so take care and have